Hello. You're joined again by me, Luca. Uh, Today we're talking about a Spanish movie, I believe, called The Platform, or its Spanish counterpart, El Hoyo, which means the hole, according to a Spanish person I know and I asked. Directed by Galder Gaztelu-Urrutia. If that is wrong, which it is, I apologize. You make great movies. Please forgive me. Starring Ivan Masagay, Zorion, Ikilia, Atonia, San Juan. Again, butchered all of that, but they're great actors, so I hope you can forgive me. I'm gonna. So this movie is a horror slash thriller, and I think it falls into either the genre of psychological or sociological thriller slash horror. It's hard to tell at some points, but you'll get the gist. If you've seen it, you'll know what I mean. Um, I'm just gonna go right off the bat and say very, very good movie. Wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was. I thought it was gonna be a generic horror movie. But because I have quite a lot to say on the good parts of it, I am going to start with the bad. And the bads aren't necessarily to do with the film, but the platform and the media, it's all part of the film, so I'm gonna talk about them. And if you don't like that, then click on a different video. Some of the negatives are voice acting. The English voice acting, which I believe will be a massive audience now for it, now that Netflix picked it up at the Toronto Film Festival. The problems with the voice acting is that they casted the complete wrong guy to play the character. I think it's Tagamir, the older guy. He's way too kind. He sounds like you're talking to your granddad. And compared to the performance that Zorion Aguilor gives, it just doesn't compare. He has a lot more dark, a lot more tone, a lot more sort of flavor to his voice and how he acts, even if you are reading subtitles like I was, compared to the guy that voice acts over him in English. So I think there's going to be quite a lot of lost potential for English audiences that watch this movie dubbed. And again, that doesn't really talk on the quality of the film, but I do think it's a negative to point out. If you are going to watch this, watch it subtitled, please. Also, another thing that comes with it is a kind of false pretense. Netflix like to advertise quite a few of their horror movies as like, oh, very scary. This is really scary. It will really scare you. And I don't think that's what the director was going for with this at all. I think he was very much more going for the kind of social commentary. I want to make you think. And a lot of people go into it wanting a horror, and they might be disappointed with an ending that leaves you sort of guessing and wondering and thinking. And they didn't want that. They just wanted to be scared and see, a few bits of gore and then go on with their day. So that could shine negatively on the film, although it's not really, again, to do with the quality of the film. I didn't really have too many qualms with the actual quality of the film. So some positives, what I thought was actually good about the film, and then I'll go on to what I think the film means, and that'll wrap everything up. But some of the good things, definitely the symbolism. Again, I'll talk about it later, but Don Quixote, the book, excellent piece of symbolism. There's all the talks of the messages towards the end of the film, and again, how just this one sort of what they call the hole or the pit reflects, society as a whole and stuff. It's very good symbolism, very well thought out, and it sort of leads me into what I was going to talk about next, which is the budget of the film, and the fact that the director previously to doing this movie has only actually done short films, and I think this sort of limited budget, um, and he's still managed to pull off all the things he managed to pull off. I think this comes from the fact that he's made short films before where every second is crucial and you can't waste time and everything has to be thought about perfectly, every second has to be planned. He's definitely done that here because he hasn't just thought, oh, I've got a longer run time so I can I can waste it. He doesn't waste it. He comes through, he essentially makes a short film into a long film, and that's one of the things that I wasn't surprised about. When I looked into the history of the director and I found out he made short films, it didn't surprise me because it felt like, in a way, I'd watched a short film. It was an hour and a half long, but I felt like I was only watching it for 40 minutes at the max. So, and I sort of commend him for that, because a film like this, especially where you have to think about so much, if it drags, it's not going to go well, and it really doesn't complement the sort of what he's trying to put forward onto the audience. And I think it is a good idea to, especially now we're getting a sort of a bit of a boom into the foreign movie studios after Parasite won, Best Picture and stuff. And I'm happy about that because you get these directors such as the man who directed this, who has only done short films on tiny budgets before, and you go, okay, here's a bit more money and here's a bit more runtime. What can you do? And they, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for some of them. And they, again, here sometimes they excel. They take it and they hit the ground running and they make something, quite close to excellent. The acting was great. The casting was great. They chose the correct people for all of it. I think, at least in the Spanish version or the original. And although this is a bit of a weird positive or good part about the film, is the set design, because although they were quite basic, just each room was the same with a number on the wall. It sounds silly, but that does take a bit to get right, and I think they did very well on getting that right, because it does give the exact feel I believe the director wants it to give. So all in all, pretty damn good movie. Give it a watch. It's definitely worth your time if you like movies like this. If you like Parasite, I'd say you probably like this movie. I don't want to compare it too much because they are two standalone things, and I don't want to just say all foreign movies are the same, but it is going to be compared to that. So if you don't like that, get used to it. It's two foreign movies that are going to be compared. Definitely not the same in the feeling and the symbolism. Definitely different, but again, very good movie. And so what it means is what I want to go on to next. The review is kind of over. Just before I end the review, actually, I want to give it a 7.8 out of 10. I think 7.8 is fair. Pretty good. Pretty damn good. If 5 is average, 7.8. So now I'm going to go on to the symbolism of the movie and what I believe it would mean. Because I do think... So before I start, I want to say I think it's up for interpretation. And I don't think the director come through with a clear sort of narrative that he wanted us to take from the symbolism he used. It's more to just, take it and see where it applies to your life and sort of see what you make of it, right? Because I've seen the interviews with him where he clearly states, I don't want it to be as black and white as the rich people are on top and the poor people are on bottom, and that's why he decided to make it random who goes to each stage each month. And this is where I think the reason it's random is because he wants to show that it doesn't matter if you're rich. If you're poor and you hate the rich, just know if you're the rich, you're gonna act like that when you're rich, even if you're poor now. So even though you hate them, you would be like them if you were up there. I think that's what he's trying to say with that. Rather, which I quite like as a message, really, because it's not what many people would like to hear. But I mean, it could be the truth. So then I think I'm going to talk about the two biggest pieces of symbolism I think that were used very well and executed excellently upon. The book Don Quixote, or Quixote, have not got very good Spanish pronunciation. I think there's definitely a double meaning there. First of all, obviously, I think sort of the main character, I don't know the Don Quixote story that well, but the main character of this kind of fits the role of Don Quixote, whereas he thinks he's a Don Quixote in the books makes up the story of him being this respectable knight and chivalrous or whatever. But he isn't actually, because he's going crazy because he's starving, or however the story goes. And I think that is kind of what happens towards the end of the book. After the fact that he's literally been starving a while in the pit, he then becomes this sort of chivalrous man, like, I'm gonna get to the bottom and make sure everyone only has a fair share of meal and no one dies. And so that is definitely taken from it. And then there's the other half that I think is more sort of external from the actual story of the book and more just the book as an object, is the fact that the book is actually like a massively influential piece of literature in Spain. It's probably the biggest one, right? And that's what he becomes, a massively influential person on the whole pit. He makes sure everyone gets a meal. But you realize towards the end he loses the book, right? The book isn't, he starts eating it at one point and then it's just forgotten about. And I think that sort of like says, the book doesn't matter to him anymore. He is not that anymore. And I think the director's really showing he isn't this sort of not knight kind of character anymore, even though he is doing the actions of the knight. That's not what he is being represented as at the moment, because his actions are again morally questionable and looked down upon by everyone else in the pit. I mean, he's killed many people now just for that, just to be this honourable knight in the book. So then I think the other interesting part is the message that they send. Obviously, Panakota is the message, is the sort of line, right? And this is where I think it gets really interesting with this, especially the last act of the movie, the last sort of 30 minutes. And when they decide that they want the Panakota to be the message, I think they realise when they find the girl that by sending this sort of materialistic thing back, or this materialistic representation back to the people up top, doesn't say that much, because really those people up top created the materialistic things as a distraction to keep us wanting to climb this kind of ladder to get to the top, to get to level 1. That's why we want to get there. We want to get the food so we don't die, right? We want to be at the top, but really it's just a distraction to make us stay in the system and continue being a part of this system and accepting it, right? So you don't go too crazy. You just have this dream of food. Oh, next month I'll get the food, next month I'll get there. And they realise by sending that back up, all they're doing is just giving the system, saying, look, we don't care about this anymore. And then the system will just change their distraction, as that's sort of what the course of history has been so far, at least if you take this interpretation of it. But by sending the girl back up, you force them to look at what they're doing. Every single person on each level was a child at some point, right? And a child sort of represents innocence. And when you send this child back up, the system really get to look at, instead of just, oh, look, we're just sending this stuff down. You see, this is what you're destroying. This is the innocence that your system is promoting the destruction of. And that, in my mind, is a huge message to send to the people up top, for lack of a better word for them. And I think that was really clever. And in terms of a horror movie, most horror movies will scare you because, when it's dark, you think you're going to be seeing a scary image of somebody in the corner of your room. This horror movie doesn't scare you like that. It scares you by keeping you up all night because you're thinking about the film and what happened in it. And that is the truly scary part, about how many parallels a movie like this draws to the real world. That is scary, and that is what kept me up at night. And that is why I think it's such a good movie. So if you disagree, I'm sure a lot of you will, because it is a very interpretable movie. If you think differently about anything I've said, please tell me. I'd love to discuss about this movie. I think it's very interesting. Don't forget to like if you liked it, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you next time. See you later. Thank you for listening.